Chris Ames, your art instructor, and welcome to Paper Bread Studio. So now that we've practiced and we're starting to get better at our lines and shapes, let's work on using these techniques to draw something fun, like a human eye. So go grab your sketchbook, a pencil, an eraser, and let's dive into this together. Alright, so for this study we're going to combine the skills and techniques we learned in the two previous line and shape videos to create a stylized drawing of the human eye together. Here I have two pencils, an HB and a 6B, a rubber eraser, and a 9-inch by 12-inch sketch pad, though any sketch pad will do. Before we begin, let's take a quick look at our reference, which will be seen throughout this video in the upper left-hand corner. The human eye is complex. Not only is it easy to get lost in the details of the iris, folds, and eyelashes, but also because it is one of the most instantly recognizable things for people. It can be difficult to first notice the things that make this specific person's eye unique. That's why it's so important to draw what you see and not what you know. We all know what a human eye looks like, but in this study we want to specifically draw this person's eye. So as we begin, keep in mind that putting your pencil or pen to the paper is only half of drawing. The other half of it is looking directly at the object you're trying to draw. So it's very important to work on training yourself to move your eyes back and forth from your object of study and your drawing as often as possible. Doing so will make it easier for you to incorporate details and nuances more effectively as you create. So let's dive in together. First, we need to break this image down into basic organic shapes. As we start, make sure to draw very loosely and don't commit too much to your lines at the beginning. The process is always to start messy using sketchy lines and then refine your marks and adjust as you move along. Let's look for the largest, most distinct shapes and lines first. Typically you can find these within areas of high contrast. Can you find the largest shape? We can begin by sketching in a very loose organic shape that encompasses the entire eye, and a line that runs almost parallel to the outer edge of our initial shape. Try to think not only about the lines themselves, but also about the negative space between them. Again, both will give you vital structural information. We could continue by also adding in a large circle for the iris. Notice how the top is covered by the contour of the eyelid. Then throw in a line for the fold under the eye and an organic shape for the eyebrow. Once we have some of the main components placed on our paper, we can start to focus on some of the smaller, more detailed lines, such as a line for the tear duct and indentation near the bridge of the nose, the pupil, and an outline for placement of the highlights. As a general rule, it's always best to begin with the largest shapes first, but once you have them placed, make sure to follow your flow. Erase when you need to, and follow the path of least resistance while you're working. If it's easier for you to change the order of how you draw in the pupil after you've laid in the contour for the iris, feel free to do so. So now that we have our structure mapped out, we can begin to commit to the base we've sketched by going back over specific lines and adding line weight to give them more definition. Here I'm noticing that the lines around the eye, the fold in the eyelid, and the outline for the iris and pupil are darker in our reference than many of the other structural outlines we've drawn. So I'm choosing to darken those specifically first before moving on to anything else in the drawing. Once we have added some weight to our lines, we can begin the process of shading in our drawing through the use of hatching and cross-hatching marks. Finding a point of focus or an area with high contrast to start can push you to lock in the darkest area first, which will then end up influencing your decision making as you slowly build up your lighter shades. I'm going to begin with the pupil here as it is the central point, and I'm going to cluster my marks closely together to make it appear very dark. After shading in the pupil, I'm going to begin to work outward from that point. As we begin to use hatching, paying close attention to the direction of our mark making is important. If we look closely, we can see that the iris has marks that appear to radiate out from the pupil, so the direction of my marks reflect that observation. Moving out into the whites of the eye, we want to keep the same thing in mind. These cross-contour lines that we are creating with our hatching explain the form and dimension to the person looking at our drawing. Notice how I'm curving my lines as they relate to the outer edge of the contour, starting lightly by utilizing the space between my lines, and then focusing on the darker areas by clustering my lines to achieve that effect. Building lines in this way begins to create the illusion that the eyeball is round. We can approach the outside of the eye in the same way, curving our lines over the eyelid to generate a structural sense of form and following the linear flow of our original contour lines. As we start to place in our hatching marks under the eye, notice how the skin is tighter there than on the eyelid, so our lines will still be curved, but the curves will be flatter and more elongated. At this point, we're still thinking about the big picture here. Sure, there are wrinkles and marks on the skin, but we want to still think as simply as possible at this point, describing the main areas of light and dark first, then moving into the small details later. Keep this in mind as we move toward the nose, eyebrow, and outer edge of the face. Between the bridge of the nose and the eye, we can visualize the upward flow by following the contour line under the eyebrow and the fold of the eyelid. Continue to try to keep your lines loose and fluid as you drag your pencil or pen on the paper, and think about using the full range and motion from your elbow to help maintain a sense of consistency in your lines. Check out the shadow to the right of the eye. Do you see the directions of the curve? The curve of the outline of the shadow appears steeper near the eyebrow, and then flattens out as it moves down past the right crease of the eyeball. As you draw, feel free to skip around from place to place if you need to. Sometimes it helps to keep moving back to build up light and shadow in other areas when you're still at this stage. Ultimately, it's about finding a creative flow that works for you. Many times when something looks off about our drawing, it's not necessarily the part of it that we're looking at, but something around it that's throwing it off. So it's a good idea to go back and define certain areas a little bit more as you continue to move forward in your drawing. Now we can go ahead and lay in the first layer for the eyebrow. Notice again how the lines move upward to the right. Follow the flow. As soon as we have the majority of our light and shadow structure placed, we can go back and add more details to our drawing, placing even more focus on our line quality to achieve a sense of dimension. Here I'm switching to my 6B pencil to place emphasis on the darker areas of my drawing. You're going to want to take your time going back into adding these areas. Build them up slowly, layer by layer, following the same framework you've laid out in your previous lines, and using cross-hatching to add extra depth and dimension where needed. Now that we have a base layer in for the eyebrow, we can shift our focus to the individual eyebrow hairs and use the quality of our lines to describe the different ways the hairs crisscross and overlap each other. I still apply the lines in the same way as before, but they all have more weight now and are curvier, expressing more of the individuality of each hair. Once you've laid in some more defining hairs for the eyebrow, you can continue to layer in additional line weight, as well as more clustered hatching and cross-hatching lines within the specific darker areas to more closely define and refine your drawing. Again, follow your flow. If you've never drawn before, it can be intimidating to make dark marks, but don't be afraid to dig into your paper. Having a balanced relationship between the darkest and lightest areas of your drawing will end up giving it more depth, dimension, and interest than a drawing done only using light marks. After we've laid in the majority of the shadows using a combination of line quality and hatching and cross-hatching marks, we can begin to add in the eyelashes. When you're drawing, generally it's good to work in your shading from the background to the foreground. Here, the eyelashes are standing out above and over the eyelid, so it was important to get in the initial eyelid shading first and then layer in the eyelashes. Again, notice the curved movement of the lines for the eyelashes that move upward from the left to the right. For the eyelashes below, notice how some of them curve in different directions and are anchored along the edge of the lower eyelid rather than the contour line that separates the eye from the lid. Now that you've completed the eyelashes, it's time to go back in for one last sweep of definition, refining your drawing even more and paying more attention to the areas you want to emphasize. At this final stage, it's often good to take a step back from your drawing. It's easy to get lost in the small details of the art you've made, and sometimes it's easy to get discouraged with our drawing when we're standing right over it. Step back and see how your drawing works together here as a whole. Taking a photo of your drawing and looking at it on a camera can also change your perspective as well, and give you important insight into areas that need to be adjusted or darkened. Alright, so as soon as you've completed your drawing, make sure to also take a step back and admire your work as well. Doesn't it feel great to create? Now you can use these line and shape techniques and building blocks to tackle any other object or image you want, from a still life to a landscape or a portrait. Approach them all in the same way, beginning loosely with simple lines and shapes, and then gradually adding depth and dimension by using line quality and direction to emphasize the forms. As always, practice will allow you to get better and better, so make sure to set aside time for yourself and you will absolutely improve. So now that we've implemented a few of these line and shape techniques, and we've worked together on using them specifically to draw something that we can see, you can begin to draw other things that really spark your creativity and truly inspire you. If you enjoyed this video, check out my website and Patreon page links below, where I'll be posting other videos that go over things such as shading techniques, realism, perspective, depth, and many more. All of your support is so greatly appreciated. Thank you so much, and until next time, stay curious.